You wake up at 5 a.m. to the sound of the bell, the first command that initiates the daily order in our closed community. The bell schedule permits no delay. You must rise immediately and begin the uniform routine as dictated by the community rules. Follow the order precisely. Shirt first, then pants, ensuring each item meets the standards set by the internal code for daily rituals. The bell is the central symbol of our schedule, ringing at exact intervals to enforce the routine that binds the group together. You join the procession without speaking, adhering to the order that requires all members to gather within 5 minutes of the bell. The gathering order is strict. You must sit upright and remain still, following the community pressure to maintain perfect formation. Every action is recorded in the ritual log, ensuring that the daily report form captures all adherence to the prescribed orders. The leader issues the next order. Prepare for the ritual by focusing your attention and readying yourself for the steps ahead. This movement is part of the routine. You must coordinate with others to execute the order without hesitation or deviation. The internal code dictates the arrangement of these objects, a critical step in the ritual that reinforces the community's order. You follow the order to replicate each gesture exactly, as any mistake could lead to consequences noted in the meeting notes. The pressure to adhere is constant. Corrections are made immediately to ensure the ritual's order remains unbroken and pure. This bow signifies submission to the community's rules, a key part of the ritual that concludes the first phase of the order. You must respond to the prompt in order, using the prescribed phrases from the internal code to show your commitment to the routine. These documents outline the daily order, providing a visual reminder of the schedule and rituals that govern our closed group life. The order requires synchronized speech, a practice that builds community cohesion and reinforces the pressure to participate fully. You follow the order to sit back down, knowing that the next step in the ritual will involve logging today's activities promptly. The bell schedule dictates every minute. You must be ready to move to the return phase without delay or questioning the order. The uniform checklist ensures that all members adhere to the same order, maintaining the community's standards for appearance and discipline. This orderly exit is part of the return process, guided by the leader's instructions to prepare for documentation in the logbook later. The bell schedule dictates this gathering at 6 a.m. sharp, a critical part of the daily ritual that must not be delayed. This bell is used for all community signals, its sound marking the start and end of each ritual in the closed group. You follow the order to stand still, knowing that the leader will check attendance against the uniform checklist next. The pressure to maintain perfect appearance is high, as any fault could lead to corrections noted in the meeting notes. This checklist ensures that all 50 members adhere to the same standards, reinforcing the community's order and discipline. This bow is part of the internal code, a silent acknowledgement of the community's rules before the main ritual begins. The schedule requires that we note the exact time, 6:05 a.m., to log later in the ritual log with date and participants. These documents outline the daily order, from wake-up to log entry, providing a visual guide for the closed group's routine. This chant reinforces the community cohesion, a practice mandated by the internal code for daily rituals. You must now proceed to the meeting room for the prescribed ritual, adhering to the schedule without question or delay. Now, the ritual begins, where every step is guided by the leader and documented for the community's records. The meeting room is set up according to the internal code, with the book, bell, and pen arranged in a specific pattern. This bell ring signals the start of the ritual's execution phase, a step that must be followed precisely to avoid consequences. The ritual log requires accurate recording of all activities, with the date and participants listed for later review. You must replicate each gesture exactly, as per the order, to demonstrate your commitment to the community's rules. Corrections are made immediately under pressure, ensuring that the ritual's order remains pure and unbroken for all members. These prompts are part of the daily report form, requiring responses that align with the prescribed phrases from the internal code. These notes track adherence to the ritual, serving as a reminder of the community's standards and the importance of following the schedule. Synchronized speech is required to build cohesion, a practice that reinforces the routine and pressure to participate fully. This concludes the first part of the ritual, and you must now prepare for the return phase, as dictated by the bell schedule. This chart outlines the order for the ritual's next steps, requiring precise adherence to maintain the community's schedule. Each movement must be synchronized with the group, following the order exactly to avoid any correction or pressure from elders. The logbook documents every ritual detail, ensuring that the order is recorded for future review and adherence checks. Bell rings mark key transitions in the ritual, and you must wait for the leader's cue before proceeding to the next action. Corrections are delivered discreetly but firmly, reinforcing the pressure to follow the order without deviation in this closed group. These cards contain prompts that must be recited in order, part of the daily report form to document participation in the ritual. Synchronized recitation builds community cohesion, a routine that must be performed exactly as dictated by the internal code. The uniform checklist ensures that all members are prepared for the ritual, with adherence monitored as part of the community's rules. Standing up signals the next phase of the ritual, and you must follow the leader's gestures to maintain the order and routine. Lining up is a standard procedure in the ritual, preparing for the reading of the community's prescribed texts in order. This book contains the core rituals and orders, with notes added by leaders to guide the daily practices of the group. Listening and repeating are essential steps, ensuring that the order is internalized and followed without question in the community. New members receive guidance under pressure, helping them adapt to the ritual's demands and the community's strict schedule. 2 bell rings indicate a moment of reflection, a step in the ritual that must be performed with precision and focus. This silence is part of the order, allowing for contemplation and reinforcing the community's values through routine practice. The group's uniformity during the ritual demonstrates the closed community's adherence to rules and the pressure to conform. Following the leader's cues is critical, as any delay can disrupt the ritual's flow and lead to consequences in the daily log. The ritual is nearing its end, and you must now transition to the return phase, following the schedule without hesitation. Exiting in single file is a standard procedure, ensuring that the order is maintained even as the ritual concludes. This marks the completion of the ritual's core part, and you must now proceed to the next activity, adhering to the community's daily routine. The uniform check is a daily consequence of the ritual, ensuring that all members adhere to the community's strict dress code under pressure. Even small mistakes can lead to corrections, reinforcing the order and routine that define the closed group's daily life. This checklist outlines the precise requirements, part of the internal code that governs every aspect of the community's schedule. After the check, you must proceed to the next location without delay, a step in the ritual's consequence phase that maintains the flow. Silence is enforced as a consequence of the ritual, a rule that helps preserve the community's focus and order during transitions. Each room must be kept clean and orderly, a daily routine consequence that supports the group's systemic approach to living. The uniformity of the rooms reflects the community's emphasis on conformity and the pressure to follow the established order. Cleaning is a mandatory activity after the ritual, with specific steps outlined in the community's rules to ensure hygiene and discipline. The bell signals intervals in the schedule, a consequence of the daily rituals that dictate when activities must be paused or continued. Waiting is part of the routine, a consequence of the ritual structure that requires members to be ready for the next phase without question. Entering the return phase, you must adhere to the cleanliness rules and prepare for subsequent activities in the closed group's schedule. The leader outlines the next steps, a consequence of the ritual that ensures everyone follows the same path in the community's routine. This form is used to log activities, part of the systemic realism that tracks adherence to the order and schedule. Documenting is a critical consequence, as accurate records are required to maintain the community's internal code and avoid discrepancies. Helping others is encouraged, but it must be done within the rules, a subtle pressure that reinforces the group's collaborative order. The atmosphere is calm but structured, a consequence of the daily rituals that promote focus and discipline in the closed community. Collection ensures that all reports are submitted on time, a step in the consequence chain that upholds the schedule and routine. Preparation is key, a consequence of the ritual that sets the stage for the following parts of the day's order. Inspections are regular, a consequence that ensures compliance with the community's standards and adds pressure to maintain perfection. This moment of waiting is a consequence of the structured day, allowing for brief reflection before moving to the next scheduled event. This movement is a consequence of the bell schedule, dictating when to transition to the next part of the daily routine. The checklist is a systemic tool, a consequence of the community's need for uniformity and adherence to the order. Joining the line is a consequence of the ritual, ensuring that everyone proceeds together under the community's schedule. Receiving the logbook is a consequence of the day's events, part of the process to document the ritual accurately. These logbooks are used for recording, a consequence of the internal code that requires detailed logs for every ritual. Preparing to write is a consequence of the ritual's completion, necessary to fulfill the documentation requirements of the community. Writing under observation is a consequence of the rules, adding pressure to ensure accuracy and compliance with the order. Avoiding interaction during logging is a consequence of the community's emphasis on individual responsibility and adherence to the schedule. Neat handwriting is expected, a consequence of the systemic realism that values precision in all records for the closed group. Using the reference book is a consequence of the internal code, requiring specific language to describe the ritual steps. The leader's silent inspection is a consequence of the ritual's importance, ensuring that all logs meet the community's standards. Correcting errors promptly is a consequence of the pressure to maintain flawless records in the community's daily cycle. This focused atmosphere is a consequence of the ritual, promoting discipline and unity in the closed community's routine. Completing the log is a consequence of the day's structure, marking the end of the active participation in the ritual. Standing at the bell is a consequence of the schedule, signaling the transition to the next phase of the daily order. Entering the logging phase, you must accurately record the ritual's details under the community's internal code to complete the cycle. Returning to your room after logging is a consequence of the routine, ensuring that the day's activities are properly concluded. Verifying the checklist is a consequence of the community's emphasis on preparation and adherence to the uniform rule. This checklist is part of the systemic realism, a consequence of the need for uniformity in the closed group's daily life. This reflection is a consequence of the structured day, allowing a moment of quiet before the cycle repeats tomorrow. The bell's ringing is a consequence of the strict schedule, marking the definitive end to today's activities in this closed community. This bell is central to the routine, a consequence of the closed group's reliance on auditory signals for maintaining order. Folding the uniform properly is a consequence of the uniform rules, ensuring readiness and adherence for the next day's ritual. Completing the report form is a consequence of the internal code, requiring accurate documentation of every ritual step taken today. This orderly setup is a consequence of the community's emphasis on cleanliness and preparation, part of the daily routine. The leader's nightly check is a consequence of the pressure to maintain discipline and ensure all members follow the schedule precisely. This quiet moment is a consequence of the structured day, allowing reflection on the community's order and your role within it. The logbook's detailed cover is a consequence of the systemic realism, tracking participation and adherence in the closed group. Even sleeping arrangements have consequences, promoting uniformity and precision in all aspects of life within the community. The automated lighting is a consequence of the bell schedule, enforcing rest periods without any deviation or individual control. This serene atmosphere is a consequence of the community's rules, ensuring peace and order during the night hours. The night watch bell is a consequence of the security measures, integrated into the daily cycle to protect the community. Memorizing the ritual steps is a consequence of the practice, ingrained through repetition and the pressure to follow the order exactly. The completed checklist is a consequence of the daily routine, a testament to adherence and preparation for the community's activities. Receiving the schedule note is a consequence of the community's communication system, ensuring everyone is informed and aligned for the next day. Reading and memorizing the schedule is a consequence of the pressure to be punctual, vital for maintaining the community's harmony and order. This precise arrangement is a consequence of the internal code, designed for efficiency and clarity in the closed group's daily life. Filing the note properly is a consequence of the rules, maintaining organization and readiness for the next day's activities and rituals. This collective silence is a consequence of the community's unity, fostered through shared routines, rituals, and adherence to the order. Sleeping marks the completion of the daily cycle, a consequence of following the community's order from the first bell to the final log.